Okay, recording in progress now.
Yes.
Is Benson, are you saying something? Okay. It appears that you have a network connection issue. So
I think I was trying to follow up with Emmanuel, who will be joining us shortly.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you so much for the heads up. So today we will be discussing board governance and procedures, and that will be taken by me. Quick notices that I would like to bring to your attention this afternoon before we start. One is that this meeting is being recorded, and I am happy that you've all consented to that regard. And second, I'm requesting that you keep your mics muted in the course of this meeting. In case you'd want to say something, I kindly request that you raise your hand. There's a function that should appear beneath the toolbar of Zoom on your screen that you can use to raise your hand, and I can see it and permit you to go ahead and speak. Fourth, I expect that you should be in position or be able at least to drop your expectations in the chat. Should you have any expectations, please go ahead to drop it into the chat. And in an event where you'd like to also send in a message or would want to comment on something or would want me to clarify a certain thing and you're unable to raise your hand, you can still put it also in the chat. And I will be monitoring the chat, and I am also requesting that colleagues, you also be monitoring the chat as well, such that we keep track of what is happening in the chat box. And at the end of the presentation, we will have a question and answer session. And this will basically be to answer your questions that you might be having, whether regarding this particular presentation, which is on board governance and procedures, or on the other coming presentations such as strategic planning, finance, and internal relations. And we have the WhatsApp group, which I believe at least all of you are part of. I am kindly requesting that you drop in your evaluation for day 1 into the WhatsApp group. We are basically requesting for about 3 things: that you should be in position to drop in your 3 key lessons learned from day 1, and you should be in position to rate the presentation as well within a scale of 1 to 10. You can give it 1, you can give it 7, you can give it 10, depending on how you feel about the presentation. And also, we expect that you can describe day 1 in just 1 word. We don't know which word would best suit you to describe day 1 of the induction, which happened yesterday, but would want you to just use 1 word. For instance, one colleague said the day or the presentation in particular was energizing. We want to hear from you. What do you say about it? Lastly, today we are going to be having 3 facilitators. The first one will be myself. After me, we will have Benson. After Benson, we will have Peace, who is the finance and admin. So that's a quick heads up on the notices. And would want to also share with you some basic information regarding our media relations. We have a website, and the website is ceciuganda.org. You would want to check out. It's very fine. It has got a lot of information too about our work as community empowerment for creative innovations. We also do have a Facebook handle, and the Facebook handle is CECI Uganda, or Community Empowerment for Creative Innovations. So if you search for any of these two keywords, you should be in position to find the page. On Twitter, we have also a handle, and it is CECI Uganda it is CECI Uganda. And there you can as well find updates about our work. We also have an Instagram handle, which is also CECI Uganda. And lastly, we have a LinkedIn page, which is Community Empowerment for Creative Innovations, CECI Uganda. All these platforms tries to provide up-to-date information to both our followers, our donors, our partners, our well-wishers, provide them with update information about our work with the refugees, particularly in Uganda. So please feel free to check them out at your free time, of course. Okay. So for this very presentation, which is board governance and procedures, we expect that by the end of this presentation, you should have at least an increased knowledge of the functions of the board of Community Empowerment for Creative Innovations, as well as its governance procedures and processes. How does the board function and what structures within the board are in place? So the purpose of the board is basically governance. Governance, stewardship, strategy, and policy formulation, as well as management of the affairs of CECI. And second is to ensure that CECI is able to fulfill its purpose, it's able to achieve its intended outcomes, and also to be in position to meet all the legal or moral responsibilities and requirements. And this is the primary purpose for which the board of CECI exists. And when it comes to the board governance framework, we have basically 3 points or reference points, if you may. One is the board policy manual. So the board policy manual provides a guideline or a framework on how the board functions at CECI. It establishes why the board exists, how it functions. So literally it has the procedures and processes that need to be followed as far as the activities or business of the board is concerned. And that is one of our 3 reference points for board governance. The second one is the constitution. We have a constitution of the organization, which is considered supreme when it comes to as well decision making, especially at the level of the board. And so this becomes one of the reference points when it comes to conducting business of the board of directors of CECI. And then the third reference point is meeting minutes. As meetings of the board occur, be it annually or the AGMs, which happen annually, and the board meetings that happen quarterly, no matter what happens, we expect that from each of the meetings, minutes are taken And these meetings can act as well as reference points for business of the board. So the roles of the board, we have quite a number of roles for the board of CECI, and here are some few. The first role here is to ensure that CECI's goals and strategies for achieving these very goals are clearly established. So what are the goals that the organization is trying to achieve, and how can these goals be achieved? Instead, in fact, this is just like what strategies are in place to achieve these goals that we intend to seek. And so one of the primary purpose of the board is to ensure that these are clearly defined, is that the goals are clearly defined and established, and that there are strategies in place on how to achieve these very goals. The second is to establish and review the policies of the organization. This is basically to be in position to strengthen the performance of the organization, be it at the board level or at the management level, which is concerned with the day-to-day running of the organization, as well as administration. So this will be one of the responsibilities of the board, to ensure that policies are established and to ensure that those that already exist are reviewed and made up to date with the current situation that exists. And of course, this is done very closely together with the management, because the management knows how well a policy is working and what gaps exist, and they are in a better position to put in recommendation on how best policy could be improved to become more effective. The third is to monitor the performance of the management. So, like I said before, the management is responsible for the administrative functions or matters of CECI. And so the board is responsible for monitoring how the management performs, whether the management is moving the right direction or not. And so this is one of the primary responsibilities of the board. The fourth is to set strategic direction. And this strategic direction, which of course includes both long-term and short-term outcomes and results, as well as priorities for the organization. So when it comes to setting in place a strategy such as what would we want to achieve in the next 3 or 4 years, it's the role of the board to see that there is a clear strategy in place, or a clear strategic direction of where the organization intends to move in the next 2 or 3 years, and including short and long-term goals that it intends to achieve annually within those years. And of course, this is done very closely with the senior staff from the management. The fifth one here is the board is responsible also for ensuring that there are appropriate risk management or regulatory compliance policies that are in place, both at the management level or at the project level. And so the board needs to ensure that each program that is being undertaken, there is a mapping of risks that is conducted, and that this mapping should include some mitigation measures in place on how some of these risks could be mitigated ahead of time. This is very important because it positions the organization in a better way in terms of achieving the results or the intended results of its programs or projects that it is undertaking. And so the board has to ensure that this kind of risk management policies are in place, and also compliance to see that with the particular donors, as well as the legal requirements, there is some form of compliance in place. Are taxes being paid to the government? Let's say, are the necessary deductions that are supposed to be done by the organization or paid by the organization for staff or to the revenue authority of the government, is that being done? And so much more. And the sixth one is also to ensure that there is effective internal control systems that can ensure compliance. We want to, it's the role of the board to ensure that the internal control systems within CECI are strong and that they are strengthened to be so. Whether it being things like, for example, funds, let's say, in this case, how does funds move from the bank to the office and to the field and back? How does this happen? We would not want a situation where it's one person that basically does all the stuff and then have the money withdrawn, for example, and then also taken to field and brought back, and everything within there is just a one-person kind of a thing. So the board is responsible for ensuring that we have a system in place, an internal control on how the business should be conducted within the organization at the management level. Seventh, eighth, is to see that there is a clear policy and delegation framework for decision making in place at the organization. We want to avoid a situation where there is a delegation that is made, for instance, at the management level for a person or for a staff to represent the organization at event B. And then when this delegation, when this person or representative goes to this event, comes there and says, you know, I was actually just delegated and I have no idea what this event is about. Neither do I have an idea of what I'm supposed to do. So the board has the responsibility of ensuring that delegation should be done in the right way and following the right principles of delegation. The delegation should be done at the right time. You're informing somebody not so abruptly, and that the person that is being delegated to conduct A is a person that has knowledge in that regard, and so much more. So this is one thing that the board is responsible for. Eighth, the board is responsible for recruiting the executive director, as well as setting the terms of employment, reviewing the performance of the executive director, and even in time include termination of the contract of the executive director. And this is one of the roles and responsibilities of the board. Okay, ninth one, the board is responsible for ensuring that financial statements are true and fair, and that they conform with law. I want to see that the financial statements of the organization expenditure, whether it being annual, whether it being project-based, or all this other stuff, want to see that they are true and fair, and that they represent some form of compliance with law. Well, this law in this regard is as broad as government law, is as broad as the contractual law, whether it being with a particular donor or so forth, and so much around there. And so this is one of the roles of the board. And the 10th is to ensure that there is adherence to high standards of ethics and corporate behavior at the organization. We want to make sure at the board level, it's our responsibility to see that the management, the staff, the volunteers, or in general, employees and stakeholders of the programs of community empowerment for creative innovation uphold some level of standards that are ethical and that are good in behavior, or corporate, as you might want to regard it that way. And some of this, of course, including things like we want to see that there's some kind of equality. We want to see that there is no discrimination, whether it being something racial, whether it being something gender-based, and so much more. But we want to see that there is some kind of equal treatment that exists both within the organization and together with its beneficiaries. The second last, the board is responsible for ensuring that there are necessary steps in place for protecting. Okay, so just a quick heads up. Our time is running out and the meeting might stop, but in case it does, please, I request that you'll be in position to join back. Thank you. So the board is responsible for ensuring that there are steps in place for protecting the financial position of CECI. We would not want a situation where the organization runs into debt that it's unable to pay. So it's the role of the board to ensure that the financial position of the organization is okay, and that the organization is able to pay its debts or other obligations that are required, and that such steps are undertaken under the watch of the board. The board decides what these steps are, and the board as well ensures that these steps are taken. And so this is one of the role of the board. The last one, the board is responsible for ensuring that CECI's management is proactively seeking a way of doing the business of the organization. Whether it being programming, whether it being projects, whether it being in other way, whatever business that the management is engaging in, the role of the board is to ensure that this is being done in a very proactive manner, and that it is in a way that meets the needs of the community. And so we would want to see that the management is able to engage innovation, initiative, technology as a way to develop its capital, as a way to improve its capital, or its financial muscle to be in position to undertake its programs within its intended areas. So when it comes to the board meetings are particularly meetings that focus on governance. They focus so much on governance rather than administrative or operational matters. The operational or administrative matters are really matters of the management. But for the board meetings should be so much focusing on governance. What policies need to be formulated, what strategies need to be in place to protect the financial position of the organization, how do we do this and that, setting out strategic plans and so much more. So just to be very clear, on the purpose of the board meetings. The purpose of the board meetings is really governance, to focus on governance issues, matters to do with governance and all this other stuff. Meanwhile, the administrative and operational matters remain for the management, which is responsible for the day-to-day running of the organization. And agenda planning, when it comes to the board meetings, agenda planning really involves every board member. And senior management staff as well can contribute in formulation of the agenda for the meeting. Let me admit Irene. Okay. So senior staff as well as board members can contribute in formulating the agenda for the board meeting. But nevertheless, the agenda of the board meeting can either be something recurring or one time. However, according to our policy, we are supposed to develop an annual meeting agenda. But in this case, for now, we'll either be having that kind of annual, which is recurring, or we can just have one time until when we get to a certain point where we are able to have that kind of annual meeting agenda. And also the board meetings happen quarterly. Every quarter, we will have a board meeting. And this board meeting should be happening on the fourth week of the last month of the quarter. Fourth week of the last month of the quarter is when we're expected to have the board meetings. For instance, for this quarter, which is quarter 4, we are expected to have the meeting in the fourth week of December 2021. So this is the frequency of the board meetings, and it's very important that you take you take note of this. And also, some board meetings will be happening annually, especially the annual general meetings, which will be involving both board members as well as management, but also stakeholders, whether it being project participants, project donors, or other well-wishers, including agencies, be it from the government or civil society. So for the annual meeting, that happens once only. So these board meetings can either be virtual, physical, or hybrid. Of course, when we say virtual, only online, yeah, just like what we're having now. Physical, totally in person, probably in a certain place, just like how these people in the picture are sitting around a certain place and discussing this stuff. And hybrid can either be both in person and virtual. Some people are attending in person while others are attending online. And so nevertheless, we will be having these both depending on the situation at hand. And for each board meeting, there will be some form of logistical support. And the scope of the logistical support will be communicated early enough, especially by the management. That is something very clear. And when it comes to remuneration, this particularly comes in the case where a board member has made some expenses because of, let's say, engaging in activities of the board and so forth. This kind of expenses incurred can be remunerated if they are fair, and also if they are incurred with prior communication with the management, particularly the person to do with finance. And when it comes to also the board meetings, all members have equal rights of, let's say, voting, equal rights of giving an opinion, equal rights of questions, and equal rights of even refraining from voting. Probably you think a subject is very sensitive that you can't vote. You have the right to refrain. And all members. When I say all members, I'm meaning the board members, because the board meetings will also at certain point involve participation of senior management staff. The executive director is responsible for attending all meetings of the board, whether it be in committee meetings or the board meetings. And the board also reserves the right to meet without the executive director. The board has the right to do so. For example, could be discussing something more related or connected with him as a person, or connected with his office, or so much more. And so the board also reserves the right to meet without the executive director, even when the executive director must attend all board meetings. Participation of senior management staff is allowed in the board meeting. And so senior management staff can participate in board meetings, and as well, committees of the board can incorporate other, say, skill set or other people who are really not affiliated to the board, nor are they affiliated to the management, but as a way to seek their skills, improve their skills, and achieve results. Okay, we have less than 1 minute, and then it will go off. So board committees, one of the structures within the board is committees. So the board has the right to establish committees or task force.